Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Agriculture and Development Seminar Series, or ADSS, brought to you by CIRCA. The ADSS encourages the presentation and discussions of development and research issues, as well as their implications for agricultural and rural development and natural resources management. For almost 20 years now, the ADSS has been facilitating a vibrant exchange of scientific and practical knowledge in agriculture and development within and even beyond the Los Baños science community. Thus, we encourage you to engage in the open forum after our speaker's presentation. My name is Stoix, and I'll be your MC for this afternoon. This is ADSS on proactive strategies for a One Health future, lessons learned, and moving forward. Okay, so we're happy to have here with us a mix of attendees ranging mostly students and kaway-kaway nga po mga students. Okay, a little noise there para marinig kayo sa ano. Okay, yeah. So we have students, mostly students here. And we have faculty members and guests and other professionals from other agencies. So welcome to the ADSS. We're also being streamed via Facebook Live. And so please check our CIRCA's Facebook page for some announcements later. Now, a few house rules before we start. Please put your phone on silent mode and reserve your questions for the open forum later. And you may use the microphone. We will be setting up a microphone here, or a piece of paper will be given to you later. Okay, so for any social media posts, SS. Now, this afternoon, we have here a Filipino molecular biologist with a specialization on infectious diseases and on One Health. With a rich academic background, Hale, as she likes to be called, holds an Erasmus Mundus Joint Master of Science degree in infectious disease and One Health from France, Spain, and Germany, alongside a Master of Science in Molecular Biology and Biotechnology and a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major in Agronomy from UPLB. So she's a alumni of UPLB also. Hill's journey is in the realm of infectious disease began while working on her undergraduate thesis, focusing on developing markers for downy mildew resistance in corn. Her passion for scientific inquiry and dedication to public health propelled her into pivotal roles, notably as a science research specialist at the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM. For sure, for most of the Filipinos who are here with us and who are watching live on Facebook, we're very familiar with RITM under the Department of Health. Okay, so during her tenure, Hill spearheaded critical initiatives in response to emerging infectious diseases. This includes the COVID-19 pandemic, which also ignited her passion for science communication. You may have seen her a couple of times on your television talking about pandemic response. So her contributions spanned from genomic sequencing of SARS-CoV-2 to outbreak investigations and surveillance of pathogens like MERS-CoV, avian influenza, and Ebola, to equipping national laboratories to respond to public health emergencies. And last year, she finished her master's degree, and she worked with world-renowned virologist, Professor Albert Osterhaus, if I pronounce his name right, in characterizing newly identified viruses in seals and dolphins that were found dead or stranded along the European coast. So with her vast experience and on infectious disease and One Health, Here to share to us the proactive strategies for a One Health future, let us all welcome Ms. Hannah Leia Elbo Morito.
Hello. One, two. Yeah. Thank you very much. I am so happy to be here and I'm honored. It's a privilege to be talking to you about One Health. I would also like to express my gratitude to my hosts for labeling me as an infectious diseases expert. I am hardly an expert, but not yet, but I promise you that what we're going to talk about today is something worthwhile. But before that, just a show of hands. Who has heard of One Health before registering to the seminar series? Who among you has heard of One Health? Okay, okay. Ayan, interesting. Because did you know that there was a community-based survey that was done here in Los Baños, and out of the 6,000 household that participated in that community-based survey, only 2% know about One Health. So after this talk, it is actually my hope that you guys would know more about One Health and that you would be participating uh, in having a One Health kind of future. Okay? So, but like as we start, I just want to give you a fun fact. So did you know that there is an increased demand for animal-based protein, which is 38% by 2050? So it is very interesting, right? And as you can see in this graph, if you can take a look at this red line right here, this line represents the demand for animal-based product from East Asia and the Pacific alone. And because of that, animal populations are under increased pressure for survival, and there is also high probability that for biodiversity loss due to this. This increasing interdependence to animals and their products is seen as a critical factor to our health with regards to infectious diseases, along with environmental health, such as environmental pollution and also climate change. Because of this, we cannot continue to advance our health if we only focus on our health, if that makes sense. So, this is where One Health actually comes in. So, One Health is defined as this. So, it's very text heavy, but let's take a moment to read it and then we can go together, discuss the core of it. Okay, are you guys done? Okay, so as you can see, One Health actually is calls for a unifying approach. It is interconnected and interdependent. But what are the things that are interconnected and interdependent? These are the health of the humans, health of animals, and health of the environment. We can also see that One Health calls for collaboration, but among whom or between whom? It calls for collaboration between multiple sectors, disciplines, and communities. So in other words, One Health is actually a holistic approach to health. But have we seen this applied in real life scenario? The answer actually is yes. In fact, one of my favorite stories is about the monkey dogs in Japan. So there was actually a time when in Japan, monkeys would come down to the countryside from the mountains, and they would destroy crops, they would destroy properties, they would destroy agricultural produce, and they would eat those. But then one farmer has noticed that his dogs has this tendency to chase these monkeys. But the thing is, there's a problem. Dogs actually, especially in a country like Japan, they're usually indoors. Why? Because their rabies is really controlled in Japan. So you wouldn't see any dogs roaming around. So this farmer had to ask for permission to do a trial with his pets. And because of this, when the city noticed that his approach was successful, they started an official training program for these dogs to train these dogs to chase away monkeys and ignore all other animals. And then when other cities noticed this approach, they also followed suit. They actually found that this solution is much better. It's cheaper and much more humane compared to other alternatives, such as these um alternatives listed below. If you can see from the back, they found that the cost of chasing away just one monkey would cost around 300,000. I forgot if it was in yen or dollars, but before it only police dogs and hunting dogs were allowed to chase these monkeys. But then when they trained, the cost of training one dog is actually 150,000. So imagine how cheap that is. And you can also rehire that dog to chase other monkeys. Now, another example is the case of Nipah outbreak in Bangladesh. So there has already been a few outbreaks of virus in Bangladesh. So for those of you who don't know, a Nipah virus infection is actually caused by Nipah virus, as the name suggests. And the symptoms would range from fever, from cough, from headache, and also from shortness of breath. But this disease can worsen to coma in a span of 2 days. Some people can be infected with the Nipah virus but not exhibit symptoms. However, 50% to 75% of those who would have encephalitis down the line would actually die within a week. There's actually no cure or vaccine for this disease. That's why this pathogen is labeled as a biosafety level 4 pathogen. So, what's up with this virus? So, a few years ago, a bunch of epidemiologists found that Bangladeshis would contract this Nipah virus from consuming date palm sap. So, date palm sap is actually a pretty popular drink in Bangladesh, especially during winter. So, what they would do is they would have a spigot. A spigot is kind of like a faucet that you would use to puncture a tree. And then they would have a collection vessel. And then overnight, they would wait for that vessel to fill up with the sap. But the thing is, humans are not the only ones attracted to the date palm sap. Bats actually love drinking from these date palm sap. But the thing is, Nipah virus is present in their saliva. So you can only imagine when they take a sip of that date palm sap. So they would leave those virus in and contaminate the collection vessel. And so when the government, also, the epidemiologists also took photos of these bats, and some of them also found that some of the bats would also pee in the collection vessel. So, so when you can imagine when the government found out about this, they launched a campaign to not drink the sap. But then this was not a little bit, this was ineffective because shortly after that, there were like 14 cases, and then 8 of those cases died. But when experts ask the relatives and the friends and the families of those people that died of the Nipah virus from the contaminated date palm sap, they would say that, oh, these people have not consumed any date palm sap. So what's up with that? Where did they get the Nipah virus infection? So alcohol. It's actually from booze. So we know that Bangladesh is a Muslim country, right? And consumption of alcohol is haram. Alcohol is actually heavily taxed in Bangladesh. And so getting an alcohol is not only very difficult, it's also very expensive. But some men would drink it as a form of socialization, of course, after work. Usually these are blue collared workers, and so they would drink the fermented date palm sap. So the process of this is, it's the same. The collection is the same, only that they would allow it to ferment for several days, and then the alcohol content would actually be kind of similar to beer. And it's way cheaper, around like $2 if you sell it. So it's a cheaper alternative to buying alcohol. So yeah, so people still actually drink it. However, relatives and friends and families are not inclined to disclose this information due to community stigma. Of course, they don't want their family members who have passed away to be perceived as someone who is bad, and they also don't want to be associated um with this kind of haram. So what the experts did, what the um public health workers and also doctors did, they actually collaborated with anthropologists so that they can carefully craft questions to find out what happened to these people. So they would craft questions about who was with whom, why are they together, instead of asking questions about fermented date sap. They would ask questions about the relationship, and yeah, they actually found eventually that these men would regularly drink fermented date palm sap, and it was like an after work thing. These are usually people who are exhausted from work and they just want to, like, cool off. So yeah, but to be honest, there is actually there's already a solution for the against the Nipah contamination. Um, they have this contraption, like a bamboo cover for the collection vessels. However, it took some time to implement this. It took some time. So um epidemiologists also thought that maybe the ick factor could help. So they actually showed these to people, the images of bats sipping into the collection vessel and also peeing in the collection vessel. So yeah. So from these examples, we can already see the interconnectedness aspect that is already evident. However, I also believe that invasive species also encapsulates the interconnectivity, where disruption in one domain have a drastic effect on all the other domains. So invasive species, just for people who don't know about this, they are species that are introduced to a certain environment, and then when they become overpopulated, eventually they can harm the environment. So actually, even in the introduction of these species, sometimes it comes from good intention. One classic example is the golden kohol. Everybody is familiar with golden kohol. So that's a classic example. Another is mahogany. So during tree planting activities, you would think, okay, when I participate into tree planting activities, I would be helping the environment, not knowing that um mahogany, so this is from Bohol, the man-made forest in Bohol. Mahogany actually acidifies the surrounding soil and it has no net benefit for the surrounding wildlife. Also, another classic example is tilapia. So, you know how when we would release tilapia fingerlings to aid in aquaculture to help fisher folks, it comes from a good intention. However, did you know that tilapia belongs to IUCN's top 100 most invasive species? So, yeah, it's really something to think about. Okay, that is just one example of invasive species by introduction. However, a species can also become invasive when you remove its natural predators. Take for example this purple sea urchin. It decimated in northern California, I think. It decimated entire kelp forests just because its natural predator, the California sea otter, was overly harvested. So yeah. So another is actually through wildlife trade, which has been criticized for playing a major role in the emergence of zoonotic diseases. Okay, big terms. Zoonosis and also emerging infectious diseases. So what are these? Emerging infectious diseases are actually diseases that are either new to a population or maybe they have existed already, but they're rapidly spreading in terms of infections and geographic reach. While zoonosis, this is very easy. Zoonosis are diseases that come from any pathogen. It's not limited to viruses, it's not limited to bacteria. But the thing is, zoonosis should come from animals and then be transmitted to humans. Okay, fun fact. Did you know that 60% of all known infectious diseases are zoonotic? Also, 74% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. Also, 76% of all zoonotic diseases are caused by viruses and prions. This is only second to your parasitic helminths or your worms. Again, show of hands. Has any of you at one point in your life wished na, lamok or mosquitoes, rodents or bats or these creatures that cause illness? Has anybody wished that they would disappear at one point in your life? Ako, yes. Yeah, thank you for your honesty. But does any of you remember nung grade school during elementary days, when your teacher would talk about the food web or the food chain? Yeah. So remember in school when we take out part just one part of that food web or food chain, everything would fall apart. So as you can see, in all of these examples that I've shown you, these relationships go beyond mere feeding relationships. The interface between humans and animals has promoted the eventual evolution of a plethora of diseases. And these are further driven by human derived development such as domestication, agriculture, urbanization. These are not necessarily bad. However, this has really contributed to the emergence of infectious diseases. However, we would also like to note that these developments these developments are largely paralleled by medical, technological, and scientific progress as well. And this has also continuously spurred us into our never-ending fight with infectious diseases. This actually made me recall, has anybody seen Captain America Civil War? Okay, great. So, do you remember when they were being forced to sign the Sokovia Accords and Vision said this, our very strength invites challenge, challenge incites conflict, and conflict breeds catastrophe. So, it's kind of like that. So, why is this important? Why do we have to talk about zoonosis? It's important to talk about zoonosis because the outbreaks and pandemics that have happened in the past are caused by zoonosis. Does anybody remember which pandemic came before COVID-19 and when? What what is the pandemic? What was the pandemic that came before COVID-19? Anyone? Ebola? It's not a pandemic. Smallpox, yes, a pandemic. Spanish flu pandemic, but not before COVID. Okay, so sige. Siret? Siret? Yeah, okay. Okay. Sige. H1N1, yes. What year? What year was that? 2009. That was 2009. So yeah, did you know that two of the major outbreaks that have happened in the last 2 decades are zoonosis? So one is right AH5 AH1N1 which ang tawag din nila is swine flu, but actually swine is just a mixing vessel for the reassortment of this for of influenza. The actual reservoir of disease for influenza are birds. So yeah. And then we also have the SARS, the first SARS. It's not a pandemic, but it was a really huge outbreak back in 2002, 2003. So, you think you would think that we would learn something from it, but here we are, am I right? Okay, so if there is one thing that these outbreaks have taught us, it's that disruption on any of these interfaces increase the predisposing factors that allow for emergence of zoonotic disease. It has also taught us that these diseases, these outbreaks can come without any warning. You wouldn't know where they would occur, when they would occur, or where they would come from. Kaya these threats require a collaboration on a global scale and have have capable systems in place. And that time is now. These are just some of the proactive measures that we can take. I will not talk about everything in the interest of time, but I'm only going to talk about a few of them. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me. Yeah, so I just want to tell you a story, a short one. So during my time in RITM, my the lab that I used to work for already has a system in place for surveillance of emerging infectious diseases. Stoics mentioned some of them, such as avian influenza, coronaviruses, Ebola. So when we heard about the unknown pneumonia in China around December 2019, we were already on high alert anticipating a wave of excuse me of samples, considering that around that time, if you guys can remember, we had a lot of tourists coming from China, right? So yeah, as soon as the whole genome sequence of the coronavirus was published, we were already optimizing our in-house assay so that even though the commercial assays are not yet available, we can already screen the the samples that we are that are coming in. So despite not having a sensitive or a specific commercial assay. Having said that, early warning systems based on syndrome and laboratory surveillance are really important. And this should involve medical experts, veterinary experts, along with other scientists, and um, that would experts on both national and international level. Also, if you are aware of ProMed, actually ProMed is this amazing outbreak reporting system that it this one ProMed pioneered the internet-based reporting, and it gives you up to date information about outbreaks on a global scale. It is actually very crucial in the early identification of SARS in 2003 and also of MERS coronavirus outbreaks. So my bottom line here is a strong surveillance system can provide early prediction of a zoonotic event, which will help the scientific community and other stakeholders to prepare and nip the zoonosis in the bud, therefore minimizing the risk of a potential pandemic. Early identification of pathogens also imply the implementation of pathogen discovery and characterization platforms. And this could involve specialized facilities with higher biosafety levels, at least biosafety level 3 and above. So I think with the establishment of the Virus Institute in the Philippines, we will be having biosafety level 4 facilities soon. And also this implies the involvement of facilities with NGS or next generation sequencing capacities and bioinformatics platforms for analysis. Is anybody here familiar with next generation sequencing? No. So next generation sequencing actually allows you to sequence DNA at higher throughput. So yeah, you have a lot of you can generate a lot of data in a short span of time. Yeah, basically that's it. Also, I just want to put emphasis on characterization because it's not good if we just keep on discovering viruses without identifying them, without characterizing them. Characterizing characterizing the pathogens that we discover means satisfying the Cox postulate. Does anybody know anything about the Cox postulate? Sa mga nag-micro, one. Oh my God. Anyway, so Cox postulate is just the means to establish the causal relationship between the disease and the pathogen. So that's basically it. And also, characterization is very important because we also want to determine the pandemic potential of the pathogen that we would discover. So actually, one good thing about the COVID-19 pandemic is that it raised our awareness about these emerging pathogens. And yeah, we are also aware that pandemics, as rare as they are, really they do occur. The question is not if, but when. The question is also what. The question is also where. Kaya Disease X, which is a placeholder name coined by the WHO, was made. So Disease X is actually a placeholder name for any unknown pathogen with the potential to cause future pandemics. How do we anticipate Disease X? We anticipate it by looking into zoonotic sources, also latent viruses. What are latent viruses? These are the viruses that may come from thawing permafrost due to global warming, and also synthetic viruses, which may be used for bioterrorism. Okay, another measure that is really important is communication. I know there are a lot of development communication students here. So the public actually has historically played a vital role in responding to public health crisis, such as through contact tracing or manual surveillance, and also through volunteerism, as we've noticed during the start of the pandemic. While community resilience is valuable, proactive measures like improving the access to healthcare, the healthcare capacity, food safety, food security, and also getting the public to take part in climate change initiatives are really crucial for disease prevention. This may entail lifestyle changes, and lifestyle changes can be challenging, but when they become ingrained through time, become habits that are ingrained through time, and with effective communication and community engagement, this will really be, promising. It is crucial also that science-based and data-driven communication partners with the general public by hearing the public, empathizing with their concerns, and also incorporating community feedback without compromising scientific integrity. So also scientists must adopt accessible language while engaging to the true stakeholders of our research, which is the public. This can happen through any platform. We can diversify our platform because this is important to foster trust and promote informed decision making, because ultimately they will be the ones to um accept our recommendations, or like the policies that um the lawmakers will implement. So yeah, having said that, in our proactiveness, we should take into account the following as well: agricultural production and farming systems, animal product trade. So as I mentioned earlier, also migratory patterns, because birds are known reservoirs of diseases, socioeconomic factors of the community, and also human behavior. Now, all of us are aware that the pandemic is still occurring. It's still not over, right? But if we set our mind at reducing the likelihood of the next pandemic happening, or if we mitigate the consequence in case if it would occur again, then I think we can actually ride the wave of the next pandemic with, at least with panache. So thank you very much. I hope I have enlightened you about One Health, and at least convinced you towards a One Health future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Hale, for that very interesting um, presentation. So it is very important for us to know what are the proactive measures which Hale presented to us. If you have other questions on the other items, since due to limited time, she presented a few of it, but for sure those in the list of the proactive measures are co-equally important and and interesting to know. Okay, and with that, we now open the floor for our audience comments, insights, and questions. Sige. If you have questions, you can write it down on the piece of paper, and we can collect it, or I may pass the mic on you if you have questions. Okay, we have a patch-in question. The first one. What are the biggest challenges hindering the implementation of proactive One Health strategies, and how can they be addressed? So what are the biggest challenges hindering the implementation of proactive One Health strategies, and how can they be addressed?
That's an interesting question. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that um people uh, One Health is collaborative, right? Collaborative among different sectors, and also different levels of expertise, communities. I think I think the biggest challenge would be the people, because One Health, if you think about it, it's huge, right? So there are people working their main focus is human health, people whose focus are animal health, and people whose focus are environmental health. And these people, although um there are already organizations that calls for unity, I think this is a bold statement, but um I feel like the challenge comes from having interests. Each of these people have their own interests, may it be research interests or whatever. And also, some organizations, especially um government offices, they have specific mandates. So of course they would be prioritizing their mandate. So yeah, I think um the challenge really is in the coordination, and also having to balance decisions that would, like having to think about decisions that would not only affect your sphere of interest, but also other aspects of One Health. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any other question from our participants here? Uh, do you know any organization that are related to One Health here in the Philippines, or?
Organizations related to One Health. Actually, One Health is pretty new to the Philippines. Um, it's actually, so I don't know. I think the only ones that I can remember, I can recall are the SEAOHUN, SEAOHUN, which is the Southeast Asia One Health University Network, which where PhilOHUN, or the Philippine One Health University Network, is a part of. And I also think that UPLB is a part of that, because UPLB has a zoonosis program. Yeah. I can also remember there's also this one organization called Next Generation One Health, wait Next Generation Next Generation One Health Philippines, something like that. So you can check out those organizations.
Okay. Any other questions from our participants?
Wow.
So we have tokens for the two students who will be asking questions.
Yeah, there's no wrong or right question.
Okay, so we have your, please state your name and your, of course, your organization, your party.
Hello po, good afternoon
Hi.
po. I'm Nicole Campos. I'm from the College of Development Communication po. I would like to ask if you have any recommendations po for non-pharma, I'm sorry po, non-pharma,
Non-pharmaceutical
yes
interventions.
po.
Okay. Um, yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, you can consider so our non-pharmaceutical interventions during this pandemic are social distancing, wearing of mask, wearing of face shields. But actually, because we are talking about proactive measures, right? I think one good um non-pharmaceutical intervention would be increasing, like having what you call, I forgot the term, but like surge capacity. Yeah, there. Like a surge capacity for our laboratories, our hospitals in the event of public health crisis. So um we have normal level during normal levels of uh sorry during times that are not of public health importance, if there is such a thing. But yeah, okay, let's say peacetime. My supervisor would say peacetime. In times of peace, um, everything is all good, but we should be preparing for when there is war, for the lack of a better term. So having that vision of how much there would how much capacity I could take as a hospital institution, as a hospital, or like a diagnostic institution. So yeah, that I think that would be really helpful because during the start at the beginning of the pandemic, we observed a lot of shortages in PPE, in oxygen, in alcohol. So yeah.
Thank you po.
Yes, sir. It's okay.
I just wanted to ask po, ma'am, if Michael Christopher Emerbolido po from UPLB Delta.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask po, ma'am, if ginagamit po ang CRISPR po in animals to reduce or to eradicate po yung mga genes that could like yung genes po na nag-result into pathogens, so that's how it works po.
Sorry. Ulit, sorry.
Kung ginagamit
Hindi ko
po,
na-catch.
kung ginagamit po ang CRISPR po, yung gene editing po na
Yes.
technique to eradicate certain pathogens or like to eradicate certain genes po na could be the cause of certain pathogens po from let's say for example bats po. Ganun po.
Actually, one of the really good utility for CRISPR is on detection of pathogens because CRISPR, di ba, ano siya, targeted. So, yeah, more than, I think it's a bit complicated um to do that, but yeah, I'm not really a CRISPR scientist to say it, but there is potential for it because gene editing, and it's a much better tool compared to other gene editing tools such as Talens or zinc finger. But yeah, um what I see with CRISPR is actually it has good potential for detection, and also for experiments in reverse genetics, probably. Yeah.
Okay. So any more questions? Okay, so we have two more questions and two
Okay.
last questions. Hello,
I will also ask a question later.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful discussion and seminar. My name is Lance, by the way. Lance Isaac from the College of Development Communication.
Mhm.
So my question is, given that One Health is essentially a multi-sectoral approach involving various NGOs,
Mm.
governments, et cetera, I want to know what the youth, such as students like us, could do for us to be able to initiate in One Health initiatives or programs or projects. What can we do right now to save our future from various zoonotic diseases, pandemics, epidemics, and the like? Thank you po.
It's a really nice question. I really like it. um, yeah, There's a lot of things you can do actually, but the thing that comes on top of my head would be um to really keep in mind that, so earlier I was giving you examples about interconnectivity of these animals to like human animal interface. It's actually very easy to forget about it when we're already outside in the real world doing our mandates, doing the things that we need to do. But if right now we can already put it in our hearts that every decision that we make, like when we think of solutions, are we thinking about the immediate solution, or would these impact, or would these have long lasting effects that cross domains? Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
And if I may add,
Yeah.
I think the youth and especially our communication students here, as part of the proactive strategies that our speaker has shared earlier,
Yes, of
on
course,
communication,
communication, yes.
particularly on communication, we
Yeah.
can.
Are you guys science communication students? Ay, wala na palang ganun. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so so if you notice, um scientific gatherings are usually exclusive, right? So there are there's not a lot of scientific engagements that involve the public. So usually when experts share their results, their researches, it would only be amongst peers or other experts. And also they sometimes whenever when they face the public as well, like for instance in the news or whatever, when they are being consulted for um events of a public health crisis, um they would speak in such a language that is so intimidating and very, like it puts a distance between the public. But the thing is, you want to establish that trust with the public, because ultimately they would be the ones who will be deciding if they want to adapt your recommendation, or if like you recommended this to a lawmaker, and then the lawmaker decides to make a policy out of that recommendation. Ultimately it's still the implementation would be a huge factor of would come from the public. So yeah, thank you for that, Stoics.
Yes. And also, I think one practical strategy that we can uh, do is to first is to filter the information that we
Yes.
share as communication students and as part of youth and not so youth anymore. And also to check our sources if we
They're
gonna share
credible.
these information. So I think as a part of the strategies that you shared, these are very helpful for us in order to um, inform others about One Health and other health-related and agriculture-related strategies and information. Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Okay, I think we can have one more question, the
Okay.
last question.
Hello po. Thank you po ulit sa super wonderful na lecture. I would like to ask po, as a student of science communication, nasabi niyo po kanina na may vital role ang communication. So, especially communicators po, specifically science communicators. So, kayo po personally, as a One Health advocate, I would like to ask, ano po yung sa tingin yung best way to convince the public to, ano ba, to fight certain stigmas such as yung pagtetest po sa HIV and yung mga anti-vaxxers po. So like, meron po ba kayong pwedeng ma-share na experience or example po ng activities na ginagawa for that?
Actually, I'm not a science communicator, but hopefully I can be an effective one. I think for in terms of probably testing or vaccine acceptance, a large part of that is because two things: either they're not informed, or they're informed but they're kinda about it. And also maybe um let's just settle with those two, because the ones who refuse to be informed are like a different breed. But um just having keep really engaging the public in a language that they understand. And also, not only that, I think a huge part of it is a huge part of it relies on whether the communicator can empathize on the concerns of the listener. For instance, as a scientist, I can recommend, because okay, these are the data, this is science, I can show these to you, I can prove these to you. But if you don't hear where they're coming from, why these findings may conflict with their culture, with their background, you might lose them there already. So yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier that having the empathy to hear them, being able to incorporate insights from your ultimate stakeholders, which is the public, without sacrificing scientific integrity. I think that's really important. Okay. Wait. I have a question. So, I wait. So you can have this. So, I told you guys about One Health, right? Can you define One Health for me? It's the intersection between the health of... Yes, okay, great, good job. But you may have heard of, I don't know if you have heard about it, but you may encounter the term global health or planetary health. Has anybody of you encountered these terms? These Yes? Okay. Can you define global health or planetary health? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's the focus of global health? If the focus of One Health is the human, animal, and environmental interface, what's the focus of global health? It's okay.
Word itself is more of like giving attention to like strengthening the health and kinabatuloy ako. I guess based on the name itself, it's more of giving attention to providing like access to a long and healthy life for everyone around the globe.
Yes. Actually, it's the health of population on a worldwide context. Now, what about planetary health? Three, three, two, one. Okay. So actually, planetary health focuses more on the environment. So the criticism with One Health is that it focuses more on animal health research. So that is the criticism with One Health. Contrary to the definition where there should be like equal focus, right? So the focus of planetary health is on environment, climate change, and also the social determinants of human health. However, so you notice already that there is an overlap between One Health and planetary health, right? Which is the climate change aspect. But um the thing that I don't want you to um I don't want you to be confused about is that these these all these three, global health, One Health, and planetary health, they're not competing fields, okay? They're complementary fields. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so that ends our open forum. Thank you very much, Ms. Hale. Okay, so if you need to take a closer look at her presentation, there will be a video recording which will be uploaded in the Circus website, and it is also available now live at Circus Facebook page. Now we would also like to know your insights and takeaways from this seminar. You may share this through our feedback form by accessing the link or the QR code flashed on the screen. To present the Circa's tokens of appreciation, may I call our Circa Deputy Director for Programs, Dr. Noor Azura Binti Adam. May I read the certificate? Circa awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Hannah Leia Elbo Morito for sharing her expertise as speaker. Sorry, before that, may I ask our speaker and Dr. Adams to be in front? Okay. Now, Circa awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Hannah Leia Elbo Morito for sharing her expertise as speaker during the ADSS on proactive strategies for a One Health future, lessons learned and moving forward. Held on 28 February 2024 at Circa Sam Arn Room, Los Baños, Laguna, signed by Dr. Glenn Gregorio, Center Director.
Should I be in the middle? Maybe also that I'm weird because of here.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Noor and Ms. Hale for for sharing with us that very informative presentation on the proactive strategies for a One Health future, lessons learned and moving forward. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon seminar. Also, we have a yes, and may we ask Dr. Noor for a closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Stoics, and thank you very much for everyone here that attended physically and also in Facebook. I think we have some viewers from our Facebook. Once again, thank you very much to Ms. Marito for this very excellent One Health talk that we have for our ADS series. So yeah, mentioning about the ADS, about the One Health, we all see it, as you mentioned just now, it includes human, and also animals and also environment, right? But sometimes now, if we put it in the context of agriculture, sometimes I can see that most of the talk is focusing on how animals' diseases towards human, and also the environment. I guess that's one of the things also maybe we can include in terms of agriculture, to see the hazardous of some chemicals that use in agriculture towards human health and also environment. So these are the things that also could be a focus that we can concentrate, because not only on terms of diseases and all of that, because in agriculture, there are other elements and also components that actually contributes to human health and also to environment. Okay, so thank you once again. And yes, definitely communication. I'm also a scientist, a biologist. We always talk in our terms, the biologist terms. So to reach out to extend it to the community, to the people, we need all the communicators. I think most of you from the communication program? No. Ah, okay. All right. So yeah, that's why the integration, the collaboration between the scientists and also the social scientists is very, very important, because we cannot work in silo. We have the results. We publish it in journals, in scientific journals, and it only reach out to the same, group of people. So, but as you know, that the result should go forward to the public. That is the most important thing. So we need more social scientists, the extension workers that can actually bring out all the results that the scientists have been, they got it from their research to the public. That is the most important things. So that's why now you can see everywhere. You can't work as scientists, not only a scientist, sometimes they need, not sometimes, they should be able to become also a social scientist in terms, in terms of communication, to get whatever findings that they have from their studies, from their research to the public. That is the most important thing. Thank you once again, everyone, to be here. I hope that to see all of you again in our future ADS series. Thank you for the team from T4D. It's a wonderful job here. And also for those in the Facebook, I wish you all a good day. For those of you who are still in the in your research stage, whatever stage you are now. So have a very wonderful time and also learn something from this ADS series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noor. Thank you again. Thank you very much. With our participants for coming here. We have a light refreshments at the back. So see you again in our next ADSs. Can we have a photo?
Pwede yung mga nasa likod, last row tayo na lang. Last 2 rows. Okay. Perfect. Okay po, tingin dito. And 3, 2, 1. Serious. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And one participant kanina mentioned about youth. You can catch Youth in Agri Talk Show in CIRCA's Facebook page. Dr. Noor has explained about the role of insects there, so you can join us, watch the previous episode.